November 1st, 1946. A date that changed basketball forever, though nobody in the building quite realized it yet. The Toronto Huskies were about to play the New York Knicks in the very first game of a fledgling league that most sports writers dismissed as a publicity stunt destined to fail within months. Welcome to Maple Leaf Gardens, where hockey ruled supreme and basketball was about to fight for survival. The building itself stood as a monument to Canada's winter obsession. Opened in 1931 during the depths of the Depression, Maple Leaf Gardens was designed for one purpose: hockey. The Toronto Maple Leafs owned this cathedral of ice, and every architectural decision reflected that singular devotion. The steep seating bowl brought fans close to the action, creating an intimacy perfect for following a puck across frozen water. Nobody had really considered how it might work for basketball, but here's what made that first night so remarkable. The building didn't just host a basketball game, it transformed, however awkwardly, into something entirely new for Canadian sports fans. Workers had installed a temporary wooden floor over the ice surface, creating a basketball court that sat literally on top of hockey's frozen foundation. You could feel the cold seeping up through the floorboards. Players would later joke that the arena felt like playing basketball inside a refrigerator. The architecture told you everything about hockey's dominance. Those iconic yellow seats rose sharply from ice level, designed to give fans unobstructed views of skating and checking. For basketball, this created unusual sightlines. Fans in the lower bowl found themselves almost too close, necks craning upward to follow shots arcing toward baskets that hung in unfamiliar positions. Upper deck spectators, accustomed to tracking a small black puck, now watched larger athletes in a vertical game that demanded different viewing instincts. Maple Leaf Gardens could hold over 12,000 for hockey. That Friday night, they were hoping for maybe half that. The uncertainty hung in the air like fog over Lake Ontario. Would anyone actually show up to watch professional basketball when they could stay home or catch college games for free? The promoters tried everything to fill seats, even offering a desperate gimmick. Anyone taller than the Huskies' 6'8" center, George Nostrand, got in free. The arena's interior reflected an era of Art Deco elegance mixed with utilitarian purpose. Concrete and steel formed the bones, but there were flourishes, decorative elements around the upper concourse, period lighting fixtures, details that spoke to civic pride despite Depression-era budgets. The gondola hanging from the ceiling held radio broadcasters and spotlights, positioned perfectly for hockey, but requiring adjustment for basketball's different rhythm and flow. Walking through the main entrance on Carlton Street, fans encountered something unusual for a Friday night in November. Instead of the familiar anticipation of hockey combat, there was confusion, curiosity. The concourse buzzed with questions. How long are the quarters? Is this like college ball? Are these guys even better than the University of Toronto team? Nobody really knew what to expect because nothing like this had existed before. The locker rooms presented immediate challenges. Designed for hockey players with bulky equipment and skates, they weren't quite right for basketball teams. The Huskies and Knicks made do, adapting to facilities built for a different sport entirely. It was cramped, awkward, another reminder that basketball was the intruder here, the unwelcome guest trying to prove it deserved a seat at the table. Outside, Toronto was a city still finding its post-war identity. The Second World War had ended just over a year earlier. Rationing was easing. Soldiers had returned home. The city was ready for entertainment, for distraction, for something new. But basketball, that was a hard sell in a hockey-obsessed nation where even baseball struggled for attention. The court itself measured the standard 94 feet by 50 feet, but something felt off about the proportions in this space. The baskets, the 3-second lane, the center circle, all technically correct, but visually strange against the backdrop of hockey boards and glass that couldn't be fully removed. Players would have to adjust their depth perception, their spatial awareness, One wrong step, and you might crash into hockey infrastructure that had no business being near a basketball game. Lighting designed for hockey created shadows in unexpected places. The puck required bright, even illumination across the ice. Basketball needed something different, especially for shooting. Players squinted, adjusted, learned on the fly how to gauge shots under conditions that would seem primitive by modern standards. No one complained. This was professional basketball, such as it was, and you adapted or you went home. But here's what nobody could have predicted. This building, so perfectly designed for hockey, so seemingly wrong for basketball, was about to witness the birth of something that would eventually rival and even surpass hockey's popularity in many markets. The awkwardness of that first night, the temporary floor over ice, the confused fans, the skeptical press, all of it was part of a creation story that would be retold for generations. The Huskies wore white uniforms with Toronto scripted across the chest. Simple, clean, professional enough. The Knicks arrived in their road blues, looking every bit like the representatives of a serious league trying to establish credibility. Both teams understood the stakes extended far beyond this single game. They were auditioning for the future, performing for skeptics who needed convincing that professional basketball deserved to exist alongside baseball, hockey, and football in North America's sporting landscape. As game time approached, Maple Leaf Gardens held its breath. The ice underneath the temporary floor waited for hockey's inevitable return. The yellow seats filled slowly with curious spectators who had no idea they were about to witness history. And somewhere in that building, between the unfamiliar sound of bouncing basketballs and the lingering smell of ice-making equipment, the future was preparing to announce itself. What happened when the referee tossed up that opening jump ball would set everything in motion. The referee's hand went up. The ball left his fingertips. Two centers leaped, and professional basketball's first official moment arrived without fanfare, without drama, just leather meeting palm in a building that wanted nothing to do with it. Ossie Sheckman caught the ball on the right side. Give and go, the simplest play in basketball. Cut to the basket, receive the pass, lay it in. 2 points. First basket in league history, scored by a player whose name would be forgotten by most, but memorialized by the few who understood what November 1st, 1946 actually meant. The Huskies had given up the first points in a league that didn't yet know if it would survive the winter. What followed wasn't beautiful. Early professional basketball resembled organized chaos more than choreographed sport. Players bumped into each other, testing what referees would allow. The rules existed, sure, but their interpretation was still being negotiated in real time. Every whistle was a precedent being set, every no-call a permission being granted. The game moved slower than what fans would recognize decades later, but faster than college ball, more physical than the amateur leagues, rougher around every edge. Defense was permitted to maul. Offensive players absorbed contact that would draw flagrant fouls in modern games. The ball itself felt different, heavier somehow, less responsive to the dribbling techniques that would evolve over coming years. Players mostly passed, shot, moved without it. The dribble was transportation, not artistry. Nobody was breaking ankles with crossovers. They were just trying to get from one spot to another without traveling. Toronto's Ed Sadowski, their center, dominated early. Size mattered more when finesse hadn't been invented yet. He backed defenders down, used his body, scored in the paint with authority that came from being bigger and stronger. The Knicks countered with quickness, with cuts, with the kind of team play that would define New York basketball for years. Neither team pulled away. This wasn't a blowout. The score seesawed, lead changing hands, momentum shifting possession by possession. Fans who'd come skeptical found themselves leaning forward. Maybe there was something here after all. The athleticism was undeniable, even if the execution was crude. These weren't college kids anymore. They were professionals, getting paid, playing with an intensity that came from knowing paychecks depended on winning, on proving this experiment could work. Halftime arrived with the game tight. Players retreated to those awkward locker rooms, sucking wind, adjusting to the pace, the physicality, the pressure of inventing a league with every minute played. Coaches drew up plays on chalkboards, making adjustments that would be laughably simple by future standards but felt cutting edge in that moment. This was professional strategy. This was the big leagues, or at least it was trying to be. The second half brought higher stakes. Both teams sensed that losing the first game in league history would be remembered, would carry weight beyond the standings. The Huskies played with home court desperation. The Knicks played with road warrior determination. Every possession mattered more than it should have. Every basket felt heavier than 2 points. Defense tightened. Scoring got harder. The fourth quarter became a grind, a test of will as much as skill. Fatigue set in because conditioning wasn't what it would become. Players bent over, hands on knees, catching breath between possessions. No substitution patterns had been established yet. Coaches were figuring out rotations in real time, learning how much rest players needed, when to ride the hot hand, when to make changes. The game stayed close, impossibly close for something that mattered this much. With minutes remaining, neither team had established control. The Huskies fed Sadowski again and again. The Knicks spread the floor, moved the ball, looked for openings in Toronto's defense that were getting harder to find as desperation increased. Then it happened. New York found a rhythm, a sequence of possessions where everything clicked, baskets fell, defensive stops accumulated. A gap opened, small at first, then wider. The Knicks weren't running away with it, but they were pulling ahead when it mattered most. Toronto fought back, closed the distance, made it interesting until the final moments. But when the horn sounded, the scoreboard told the story. New York 68, Toronto 66. The first game in league history belonged to the Knicks. Ossie Schekman had scored first, but the entire team had won together. The Huskies had lost honorably, pushing the visitors to the final seconds, proving that competition would be legitimate, even if the league's future remained uncertain. Fans filed out of Maple Leaf Gardens, unsure what they'd witnessed. Some were converts, ready to come back for more. Others remained skeptical, convinced this basketball experiment would fade once hockey season hit full stride. The newspapers would cover it, but briefly, without the breathless excitement reserved for hockey or baseball. Professional basketball had arrived, but it hadn't announced itself with thunder. It had slipped in quietly, through the side door, hoping nobody would kick it back out. What none of them knew, what nobody could have predicted, was that this awkward beginning would evolve into something magnificent. That temporary floor over ice would become a metaphor for the entire enterprise. Basketball building its foundation on top of hockey's territory, eventually claiming space nobody thought it deserved. The league would struggle, teams would fold, cities would abandon franchises. But it would survive, it would grow, it would become the global phenomenon that seemed impossible on this cold November night in Toronto. 75 years later, the NBA would celebrate this moment, would honor the pioneers who played when nobody was watching, who competed for tiny paychecks in half-empty arenas, who believed in basketball's professional future when all evidence suggested they were delusional. Ossie Schekman's first basket would be replayed, remembered, revered as the moment everything started. And somewhere beneath it all, Maple Leaf Gardens would stand as the unlikely cathedral, where professional basketball took its first uncertain breath and somehow survived to tell the story. That cold Friday night in Toronto launched something nobody could fully grasp. The temporary floor would be removed, the ice would return, but basketball had planted its flag. From that 68-66 final score, a league emerged that would transform American sports forever. The The pioneers played, the skeptics watched, and history quietly began its long march forward.